Шановні колеги, всім доброго дня.
Good afternoon, everybody. We continue our working center in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and topic of our current press conference is high mobility groups of internal communication, reform of the work with personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine. The first outputs, and I'm pleased to give the floor to Ruslan Kavatsyuk, advisor to the Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine General Staff. Thank you. This is one of the first times when we speak not about the intentions or plans, but about the first outputs of our work. I have Oleksiy Makukhin, Colonel Viktor Shydliuk, Deputy Head of the Central Research Institute of Armed Forces, Mr. Igor Shydliuk. Then we have Lieutenant Colonel Viktor Kashliuk, and we have Father Andriy Zielinskiy, military chaplain. Today we will speak about the high mobility groups of internal communications and first outputs of the work of these groups in the armed forces of Ukraine. From the very beginning, I would like to set the format of this presentation. I will give a couple of minutes to each presenter for speaking on the topic, and then we will have Q&A session. And I would like to invite Oleksiy Makukhin to speak on the background of the issue. On October 1st, 2015, the Minister of Defense, Stepan Poltorak, had signed the communication strategy for the armed forces of Ukraine, and the framework of this strategy. The current project has been being carried out, and to implement the strategy, we organized a working group which united representatives of the Defense Ministry and the General Staff. Jointly, they developed this project and its implementation plan. This was the background for this project. Thank you. Based on the strategy which Oleksiy mentioned, we received a mandate from Colonel Viktor Muzhenko, head of the General Staff, to strengthen external communications of the armed forces, and jointly with our colleagues to strengthen communication, to strengthen internal communications. For us, it was important to find key solutions, how to address the most painful, the most sensitive issues, especially in the ATO area. Quite often, our servicemen who stay in the ATO area, they are cut down from the informational sources. They find themselves under pressure of the hostile information of our enemies, and at the same time there is an obvious lack of information from the mainland Ukraine, and all this is in the situation when our armed forces are undergoing the reform stage. Quite often, in result of this reforming process inside the armed forces, even the traditional communications are broken. And that's why we needed to find some innovative solution. With this, I would like to give the microphone to Mr. Boiko, who is head of this project, to describe the structure of the project. Thank you. I will describe the development of this project. In mid-October, we had the kickoff presentation of this project, and immediately after that date, we started to build up internal and external communications. The first preparatory stage of the project lasted from October to December. This was a period when we selected qualified people able to present undistorted information, to find the problem-based approach, to be able to present decisions made by political and military leadership of the country. Thus, we selected people able to transfer the truth. During the first 2 years of the war, we already had the groups of moral and informational support to the troops, and during the first 2 years of their work, those mobile groups had gained some experience, and of course we used that people and their experience. We optimized that experience, analyzed it, applied it in a form of special exercises on the exercise field, and organized trainings for them, and understood that those people they volunteered to conclude contracts, and by early January they went to the ATO area. During the first days of their work, they demonstrated good level of work. The commanders on sites immediately showed that they were interested to get these brigades, these groups, to the deployment of their troops, and the staff appeared to be able to provide qualified answers to the most often asked questions, and unfortunately, we revealed that not always immediate commanders of military units are able to give qualified answers to all the questions put by soldiers. That's why the work of these groups of moral and informational support for the troops, their work is very important. They are also instrumental when they organize the feedback. The groups are divided into the following components. Alpha group, this is high mobility group. This is informational and moral support group. It includes one inspector, one ideologist, one military chaplain, and military psychologist, and they deliver necessary aid. They are able to speak on a big variety of social issues, spiritual and religious issues. They are able to answer some social security issues, which were not so numerous. The next group is Beta group, which comprises inspectors and concert groups. These are communication groups which provide cultural support to troops. And Gamma group, which comprises instructors in combat operations like opening, fire tactical medicine, military exercises, etc. And a mega group. This is logistics group which ensure feedback with the personnel and bring all the most problem issues to the attention of General Viktor Muzhenko, head of General Staff. Because this is his final responsibility. These are not like inspections. These are high mobile communication groups which allow communication to flow freely from the soldiers to the leadership of the military forces and vice versa.
And I would like to request Oleksiy to tell a little bit about how we were preparing this project from the point of view of material support. This project, well, we're using the material support of the American Foundation Spirit of America, which was helping us materially. And also there was a support of Ukrainian NGO E+. They helped, and that was for the first time in Ukraine. They brought some vehicles as humanitarian assistance for military. I know that other organizations are using the same route which was discovered, opened up by this NGO.
Подякувати обом нашим партнерам.
I would like to thank our partners for that. So please show the photographs of what we are doing, of how these high mobile groups of internal communications are working. And now Viktor Shydliuk will tell us more about modern techniques of work with the personnel. When preparing the project, we understood clearly how important internal communications are in the armed forces of Ukraine, so we paid serious attention to the content of the internal communication. We understand the responsibility to families of servicemen, to servicemen themselves, in the aspect of communication. A lot of attention was paid to preparation and improvement of work of commanders. So we developed some methodologies that we introduce. In a sound society, every person from the childhood aspires for realization of himself or herself. And every person wants to be assessed justly. The human being is the highest value, and that was the basis of our methodologies or techniques that we teach our commanders. These techniques are Ukrainian, the authors are here. One of these techniques is the technique of situational leadership, the technique of improving the respect to the commander, the technique of analysis of actions based on approval of by the personnel. Most of the servicemen and officers were thanking us for such techniques after we started explaining what should be done and how it should be done. So we were using the experiences best practices. When we were teaching these techniques, we had an impression that servicemen were basically discovering things for themselves. You shouldn't be just forcing a private to do something via punishment. So most people understood all that, but some of the servicemen did not believe that you can, that the commander could work based on approvals without punishing the servicemen. So this is just the beginning of work, but preliminary results show that such work is necessary. As to the information, we are ready to do the same with the new groups that will be created, and will be teaching tactics of actions, tactical medicine, and other things. This way we built our work. Thank you. Now Vladimir, who will tell us more about the experience of work with the soldiers, what are people interested in, what they discovered in a month and a half of testing work. First of all, the personnel was ready to communicate. You see the conditions where we worked. These are conditions in ATO zone, and the communication is important there. The main directions to which we paid a lot of attention is to social, political issues, the development of armed forces of Ukraine, prospects, development of armaments, material support, and what people are mostly interested in is social issues, because we started working in January. That was time when some important decisions were made in the armed forces, and that was changes in structure, change of the monetary support amounts, also the system of contracting was changed. There were new mechanisms introduced of ensuring some guarantees for those servicemen who were recruited within mobilization framework, and they had many questions. Also, it was very good that the group arrived to them, to the front line. They were surprised by that, and they believed us. We shook hands with every one of them. Many things that they were not sure in were clarified to them. We were showing them how we were looking for the different communication ways, so that the situation changes to the better. I would like to show some printed leaflets. They were designed in the general staff together with the volunteer organization, the Legal 100. And this gives all the resources, links to websites, telephones of hotlines, the mechanisms of getting different social guarantees and privileges, and that's what we left with every unit where we worked. The main thing is that we continue our work. The general staff received a big experience, and that allows us to reform the system of social insurance. And this way we can change the social policy in the state.
Andriy.
I would like to give the floor to Father Andriy, who will describe his religious and spiritual work with our servicemen at the front line. Today, several times you heard about establishing communicational process or building up communications inside the armed forces. And it looks like the main objective could be described in several words. The care about Ukrainian servicemen, and this care motivated us to start this project and motivated us to implement it. And via this project, we got this opportunity to shake hands with each serviceman in those military units which we visited. We became able to hear people, to understand their needs, and try to provide assistance and help to those people. This gave us a precious opportunity. What are the biggest concerns of people? How we can help them, even in spiritual sense, as a chaplain. How could we support them to strengthen their motivation? How to support them to allow them to feel that they are doing right things in life? In social sense, in sense of communication, we are thus not just translating information, providing information, but actually we are retranslating some senses and allowing people to understand why they are in that places where they are, why they are at the front line. This allows people to understand their mission and their responsibility for their land and for the people of this land. This is a big means to mobilize the spiritual force of these people, to motivate them to understand what is their mission. Today you heard that similar groups functioned even before the ATO was started, and that groups had to focus on the principle of systemic approach. Of course, there is special training for officers and military chaplains who work with the servicemen. So the first principle is systemic approach. The second principle is regularity in communication. And the regularity of communication is a necessary precondition for psychological rehabilitation of servicemen, and it was a very important aspect of our work. And the third principle of these groups is the sufficient level of qualifications for the team members. That's why we brought participants of our groups to Kiev for special training before beginning of the mission, before going to the east. That's why, speaking about my spiritual work, I would like to mention motivation, strength, stamina, and broad support. These are the major pillars in a chaplain's work. Our objective was to hear, to understand, and to provide support to people. Thank you for your attention. We are ready to answer your questions. Ksenia Dvornikova, Fifth Channel. I have a lot of questions. So the first question, how many members were in your groups, alpha, beta, gamma groups, etc.? Please allow me to speak. There were some 13 people. In Alpha, we have 4 members, and 5th is the driver. Why they are high mobility groups? Because they move all the time. They move along the front line. They choose where to go, how to move there. These are combat groups. They are well equipped even for combat conditions. These are servicemen. Beta group. These are between 8 and 10 people who travel on not on military car. There's like a mini concert group. Of course, there is a senior leader of this group, but again they travel in line with the specific program, and they perform a special repertoire, able to raise the military spirit and to support the motivation of people. Gamma group comprises up to 8 people, which comprises military instructors, combat operations instructors. They are top professionals, and they again follow the special program. For example, Alpha group goes to one unit in some 2-3 weeks. Beta group visits this the same brigade, and then Gamma group goes there. We have Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3. Then we have Beta 1, 2, 3 groups, and they change each other in turn. And after groups A, Alpha, and Beta, the group Gamma goes to the same unit. By the end of this month, we will deliver one more training for 30 more for 30 more instructors. These groups are designed to work in the exercise fields where military units stay during upgrading periods, where they upgrade their functionalities. And the Alpha group will have 4 trainings a year. That is, we will have 120 Alpha workers. How much kilometers did you manage to cover during this first part of the year? we travel to those military units which are along the first line, along the front line. And then we travel to the second and third lines. And we cannot calculate whether these are how long this is in kilometer distance. They visited actually the front line, 300 meters, 700 meters from the front line, and that is, they visit brigades in line with the requests of the commanders of brigades. We have special communication channels and what number of servicemen did you cover approximately, just roughly? Maybe I will add very briefly that actually all the brigades at the front line were covered by those three groups. This was not the last visit. All the groups will continue to work to study the situation. As of now, we have covered the entire front line. And one group still continues to work. These are thousands of people, And when you mentioned the list of issues, you described in general social issues. What did people ask? When the mobilization will happen? When the wages will be raised? When the offensive will take place? Actually, those questions which you mentioned were asked almost in all the military units. The most frequently asked question, changes in the structure of armed forces and changes in the wages in line with the presidential order. The wages were raised and bonuses were raised, and now minimal wage for servicemen is 7,500 hryvnia. Taking into account that bonuses are paid based on some achievements, while violations result in decrease of the bonuses, then this required a more explanation on behalf of our inspectors. Then about those who were demobilized, those who were mobilized. In January, 1 year period for mobilized soldiers almost run out, and that's why there were a lot of questions whether those who were mobilized a year ago, whether they would be demobilized in January. So we had to explain that we are waiting for the presidential decree stating about demobilization and the schedule for this demobilization. Of course, those who agreed to conclude a short-term contract for half-year period, the service we held special sessions, advisory sessions with these servicemen, explained their rights and the privileges. As for the social guarantees to servicemen, by the end of last year, an amendment to labor code was introduced about strengthening social guarantees, and we explained to people that their employment should be guaranteed, and that wage should be paid to them at the previous level. And we have drafted special documents on this matter.
In one unit of the Marines, there was a situation when one of the sailors asked what to do because the employer was pressing on him. Another sailor said, "But I defended my right in the court and I was paid the average salary in advance." So these are the examples that we are using how to defend your rights. The social activity of every serviceman is important. They need to know what their rights are. These are the main issues. Any other questions? Once no, thank you. See you again.